how's it going everybody? My name is LuckyBunz, and in today's video I'm going to be going over whether or not you should save your Super Rocket Radar from the Misunderstood Mischief quest, or if you should use it and get Hoopa Unbound. Now as always, before we go ahead and get started with the video, if you guys do end up enjoying it, please make sure to smash that like button down below. It helps me out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So I recently broke down the Mischief Unbound event in Pokemon Go, and I had mentioned that I would be making an additional video going over whether Hoopa Unbound was actually worth getting. Now if you guys haven't watched that video yet, I would recommend watching that one first, as I go over all of the event details, including some key information that we're going to talk about right now. Additionally, I also go over some tips and tricks which I think you'll find helpful. But anyways, let's go over what we know currently. So we know that if you get the Mischief Unbound Special Research quest, you're going to be able to transform Hoopa from its confined form to its unbound form. So basically, if you decide to go with the completing the quest route, which I assume most people are probably going to do, you have to beat Giovanni and catch Shadow Lugia, which is step 15 out of 16 in that quest line. Now in a previous video, we talked about Shadow Lugia, and it wasn't really that meta in PvP or raids. Now if you want Shadow Lugia, or if you've already caught Shadow Lugia, this isn't really going to apply to you. But essentially, if you haven't completed step 15 out of 16 and beat Giovanni, you still have the chance to save your Super Rocket Radar for a future Shadow Legendary, possibly even Shadow Mewtwo. Or another Shadow Legendary like Shadow Raikou or Shadow Entei, which may be coming next. I don't know for sure, but it's definitely a possibility. Now once again, going back to the main point of this video, it's not so much about Shadow Lugia, whereas it's actually about Hoopa Unbound and whether or not that Pokemon is worth getting. So because Hoopa Unbound actually transforms from Hoopa Confined, this does make things a little bit more complicated, but also in a good way too, because we now know that Hoopa is going to have the same movesets. So ideally the best movesets for Hoopa are going to be Confusion plus Psychic and Confusion plus Shadow Ball. Again, it's going to be the same as Confined when it transforms into Unbound. Now when it comes down to the base stats for Hoopa Confined, it's going to have 261 attack, 187 defense, and 173 hit points or stamina. And then when it transforms into Hoopa Unbound, its attack stat is going to go all the way up to 310, which is actually higher than Mewtwo. The defense stat is going to stay pretty much the same. It's going to go up to 191, so up by 4. And then the hit points and stamina stat is going to stay exactly the same at 173. So the attack jump is actually massive for Hoopa Unbound. But there is a key difference as well between Hoopa Confined and Hoopa Unbound in regard to the typing of this Pokemon. So Hoopa Confined is going to be a Psychic type and a Ghost type Pokemon, but Hoopa Unbound is going to be a Psychic type and a Dark type Pokemon. So that is actually a significant difference because we're going to have to factor in resistances as well as vulnerabilities. Now without diving into vulnerabilities and resistances too much, I do want to go over the DPS times TDO spreadsheet on GamePress, where we can actually take a look at Hoopa Unbound versus Mewtwo. Now Hoopa Unbound actually performs slightly worse than Mewtwo with Confusion and Psychic, so basically Hoopa Unbound isn't going to be a bad raid attacker per se, it's just not going to be as good as Mewtwo, which was available in raids quite a few times this past year, and it's most likely going to be available in raids throughout the next year as well. So pretty much if you already have a bunch of good Mewtwo built up for raids, you're not going to use Hoopa Unbound because Mewtwo is definitely going to be better, especially if it has its signature move Side Strike, which you do have to use an Elite TM to get that now. But even if you don't have Side Strike, even with Psychic, which is a TMable move, it's actually still going to be better than Hoopa Unbound. So basically when it comes down to the raid meta, Mewtwo is going to still be your MVP, but if you don't already have a bunch of Mewtwo built, Hoopa Unbound could actually be really good for your lineup. When it comes down to raid parties, I basically just like to go off the team of 6 rule, so basically team of 6 for any typing, so that could be a combination of Psychic type Pokemon in this case. So for example, you could have like 4 Mewtwo with Confusion and Psychic, 1 Mewtwo with Confusion and Side Strike, and then 1 Hoopa Unbound. I mean, you're only Hoopa Unbound for that matter, but you could have Hoopa Unbound on that team as well with Confusion and Psychic, so you have a really solid lineup of Pokemon right there. But if you end up deciding to build another Mewtwo in the future, well then obviously Hoopa Unbound is probably going to get kicked off that spot. So basically my consensus in short is going to be that if you don't already have a bunch of good IV Mewtwo that are already built for the raid/gym meta, then yeah, Hoopa Unbound definitely makes sense here. Now following that, I want to talk about Hoopa Unbound in PvP, specifically the Master League. So Hoopa Unbound is very similar to Mewtwo in terms of its movesets as well as its typing. So Hoopa Unbound, like I said earlier, is a Psychic type Pokemon and a Dark type Pokemon, whereas Mewtwo is just a straight Psychic type Pokemon. So outside of the typings, let's also look at the base stats here. So for Hoopa Unbound, we're going to have 310 attack, 191 defense, and 173 hit points or stamina. And then when we take a look at Mewtwo, we're going to have 300 attack, 182 defense, and 214 hit points or stamina. So when it comes down to Mewtwo, it definitely does have a bit more bulk compared to Hoopa Unbound, but when it comes down to their resistances and vulnerabilities, this is where it actually gets a little bit more interesting. So when it comes down to Hoopa Unbound's resistances, it actually has a double resistance to Psychic type Pokemon, which is really solid for it. Now when it comes down to Mewtwo, Mewtwo has a single type resistance to Psychic types, and it also has a resistance to fighting types. whereas Hoopa Unbound would actually take neutral damage from fighting type Pokemon. So with that being covered though, let's talk about the vulnerabilities. So Hoopa Unbound is going to be double weak to bug type Pokemon, which actually is really uncommon in the Master League. That being said though, Hoopa Unbound does have a single type vulnerability to fairy type Pokemon, which are a bit more common, so that does suck because Mewtwo does not have that vulnerability to fairy types. Mewtwo does have a single type vulnerability to bug type Pokemon though, so it's not completely against Hoopa Unbound right there, although Hoopa Unbound is going to take way more damage. Mewtwo unfortunately does have a vulnerability to ghost type Pokemon though, as well as dark type Pokemon, which are quite common in the Master League meta, I would have to say, especially with the Yveltal out there. Yeah, that's going to be kind of rough for Mewtwo, whereas Hoopa Unbound doesn't really have to deal with that because it's going to take neutral damage from ghost type moves or dark type moves. Now that I've basically gone over all of that, I know it's kind of confusing for some of you who don't really get this stuff, but basically considering the stats, resistances, and vulnerability, Hoopa Unbound actually has really good potential to be good in the Master League. So Hoopa Unbound is actually pretty good, and you know, the comparison here in terms of what you're giving up is that you're going to give up a Super Rocket Radar to get Shadow Lugia in order to get this without having to pay the $5. Now, if you don't really care about spending the $5, you could just wait, buy the quest, get Hoopa Unbound additionally, and then you could also save that Super Rocket Radar for a Shadow Legendary later down the line. I'm assuming most people don't want to spend the $5, but if you really don't care about the $5, that's pretty much the best option that you have because you can get the best of both worlds. With that being said though, if it really comes down to you just not wanting to spend the $5, I feel like Hoopa Unbound is honestly a decent choice. Like, you really can't go too wrong if you end up deciding to do that. The trade-off again is that you're not going to be able to get that extra Shadow Legendary, whatever it may be in the future, by not saving that Super Rocket Radar that you can potentially stack right now and not get Shadow Lugia. So that could be an extra Shadow Mewtwo that you can't get, or it could be like an extra Shadow Raikou or Entei or any of the other legendary Pokemon that we haven't gotten as Shadow forms yet. So it's a really difficult decision if you really just don't want to spend the $5 on this quest, because that Super Rocket Radar could be used for something way better later down the line. And Shadow legendary Pokemon are among the best of the best. I mean, they're like really expensive to invest in, but they are so worth it. I mean, I gotta tell you guys this right now, like, even if you don't get a good IV spread on your Shadow Legendaries, like, they are just so good by themselves with that Shadow boost that it makes it totally worth it. Like, my Shadow Moltres is amazing. With that being said though, of course the decision is going to be up to you guys. Let me know what your plans are in the comment section down below, whether you're going to catch the Shadow Lugia and then get the Hoopa Unbound Special Research Quest, or if you're going to skip Shadow Lugia, save the Super Rocket Radar, and then also skip Hoopa Unbound, or if you're going to skip the Shadow Lugia, save the Super Rocket Radar, and then pay the $5 for the Hoopa Unbound Special Research Quest. So you pretty much have 3 solid options right there, but again, that's basically all I have for you guys in this video. I can't really tell you what is going to be the best decision to go for. I mean, in my opinion, if I wasn't a free-to-play player, I would probably just save the Super Rocket Radar and then pay $5 for that Special Research to get Hoopa Unbound, if you actually care about Master League PvP. If you don't care about it that much, then I would actually just save the Super Rocket Radar and probably just skip Hoopa Unbound. Once again, that is not me telling you what to do, I just think that's probably the best scenario in terms of how you could actually benefit from both of these things. Now, if you're a free-to-play player like myself, well, your options are pretty much either catch Shadow Lugia or don't catch Shadow Lugia, but then not get Hoopa Unbound, so I don't know, I'm definitely split on this, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Anyways, guys, that's gonna do it for this video, but in case you guys want some more tips and tricks, check out these videos right here. But before you go, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.